Terrans, the human of Starcraft. They are a faction of humans that are effectively pioneers, colonists, eternally so, separated from the human birth world thanks to a freak accident. But now, they're growing, they're expanding, they're grinding up those resources and turning them into sweet cold cash. They're drinking lots and lots of Vespi. So let's talk about them and their history. To understand Terran history, you have to go to the 21st century. In particular, our own timeline. Basically, in the 20th and 21st century, companies started recklessly and rapidly advancing and proliferating technology like cybernetics, nanotechnology, gene splicing. Nukes are surprisingly one of their products that they give out. And that's all. And this leads to basically third world countries going in and challenging the first world superpowers, which eventually leads to the United Nations going defunct during this period, and like several like economic systems basically. But what was even more worrying to some people was that people were starting to mutate, starting to gain powers and different abilities, stuff like psionics, being able to read someone's thoughts, or maybe you're just growing extra tough, or you have some heightened senses and stuff like that. Well, this kind of stuff leads to the rise of fundamental humanist groups and hardline religious movements who are in opposition to both the corporate interest groups who spread the technology and the mutants and cyborgs and gene slicers. They're against these guys because they see them as polluting the human form. Whether or not they're right or not is not really subject for debate. I think they're pretty much in the wrong here because, humanity was just reaching that point in this thing. Sorry about that. I just need to sneeze. Honestly, if you're developing the power to lift something with your mind, that's pretty cool. Anyways, something that also needs to be known is the human population during this period soars from like 6 billion to 23 billion, with incredible increases in pollution and resources growing scarce on Earth. Now, there's interstellar technology is not that great yet, so that'll come later. The conflict between these like opposing interest groups absolutely devastates the economy, political system. The United Nations fully collapses, and out from the ashes in the 22nd century, in the year 2229, on the date of November 22nd, the United Powers League forms from the ashes of the United Nations. The UPL is a government rooting through enlightened socialism. This is though in the background they use heavily fascistic police actions. They control the media. They downplay tragedies. They create others that they can then persecute, and they call it socialism, which is kind of redundant because fascism is a type of socialism because it's very authoritarian government. Anyways, the UPL eliminates racial separation. It enforces English as the sole language, bans many of Earth's religions, and basically tries to homogenize Earth's cultures for all time. It's able to do this throughout pretty much the entire world, with the exception of certain South American countries that just are too dangerous to really get under control. Basically, they're too anarchic. They're basically the slums. If I were to say anything like that. Slum nations, yeah. So the UPL is formed from these humanist groups and hardline religious groups. And they're like, all right, we got to get rid of these mutants now that we're in control. Let's purify humanity. And so they come up with Project Purification, which, is a pretty final plan, if you don't mind me saying. Pretty final solution. So they basically round up any deviation from the accepted human standards. Genetic deviation, cyborgs, drug users, religious teachers and followers, political dissidents, hackers, criminals, and basically clones, basically synthetic people. This is all sourced from the Starcraft 1 game manual. Anyways, their culling killed 400 million people, and the media basically covered it up by downplaying it. But out of those 400 million people, a certain small amount actually survived because of one man. Doran Roof is a scientist who is not connected to Project Purification. However, he is obsessed with settling the stars. And he really wants to do it. He wants to go out there, settle the stars, and be good. And taking some of these prisoners who might not be, all that worthwhile, are already doomed. So you might as well just send them out, get some data. So he selects about 56,000 people from these, dissidents, from these purges, and he screens them through a supercomputer called Atlas. Atlas cuts 16,000 people who he determines would not be able to survive out in a colony. So now we have 40,000 people. These people are split up and put into four massive deep space carriers that are automated and they're stored in cryogenic chambers in these space carriers, and they're sent towards this planet of Gantris 6. These carriers are called the Naglfar. I think I'm saying that right. The Argo, the Serengo, and the Reagan. The Atlas supercomputer was installed in the Naglfar, and the one that scanned all the people. They take these four ships with them all following the Naglfar and the Atlas supercomputer, and they go off into the distance, off towards Gantris 6. This was only supposed to take like a year, and the Atlas supercomputer notably calculated that this colonist had a genetic strain that within a few generations might result in powerful psionics, and sent this back to the UPL and Doran Roof in particular. Now, on this journey, the navigation systems linked to Atlas somehow failed and wiped themselves clean. They basically reset the factory conditions without any reference back to humanity. So because of this, where's Gantris 6? Well, the computer doesn't know, so it's just going to continue until it reaches Gantris 6. 28 years later, reminder, this was a one-year trip. 28 years later, these guys, their colony ships, exit their form of faster life travel. They travel through a warp space, basically, is what they call it. This space is just a second dimension that they go for faster light travel. And their engines only do that because the automated system detects that the engines are melting down, are in supercritical conditions, and these colony ships, they all crash land onto 3 different planets. The Naglfar lands onto Tarsonis. The Argo crash lands onto Moria. The Serengo and Reagan crash land onto Umoja. Now, I believe it is the Reagan that survives, but the Serengo colonists all die. So now we're down to 30,000 people, 28 years in warp space away from Earth. It is at this point that, you might reasonably say, all right, how did they survive this? Well, actually, no, not how did they survive it. How does the UPL even come back to this? That's interesting. That's explained in Brood War, basically, that can be gathered by just thinking about Brood War. The Atlas computer sends data back to Earth constantly. So all AI that's based off of the Atlas will continue to do that, and therefore, the UPL gets distant updates on what's going on out there. Anyways, these colonies are all in different systems and stuff like that, so they all develop their own colonies. But it's important to notice that the Naglfar, because it has the Atlas, is able to develop faster towards technology, be able to reach the stars again, because they don't need to do the computation. They don't need to design computer systems to get them up into the stars. And so they start colonizing new worlds and stuff like that. And they get in touch with Moria and Umoja. And these colonies are all doing their own thing. They all have they all starting colonization efforts, but Tarsonis is actually farther along. So he's like, hey, Tarsonis, hey, come on, join in. With me at the head, we'll colonize the stars. Just trust me. And Umoja and Moria, having built up their own sense of pride, having developed their own technology, having gone through the same thing as they do, of being persecuted by the UPL. They don't want a central government. They want to be under their own power. So they refuse. But they do allow for economic and trade and all that stuff. And they're fine with that. Well, Tarsonis doesn't like this. So when they settled 7 colonies that they started calling core worlds, they formed something called the Confederacy. Now the Confederacy's flag is straight up just the United States Confederacy flag, the battle flag of the Confederacy. I don't know why they chose this. I mean, it's super flavorful. It adds to the thing. It makes it so interesting to see that cutscenes and know, hey, these are what the guys are based off of. Anyways, but anyways, going back to that, after announcing the formation of the Terran Confederacy, Moria said, all right, now we need to build up a power base to oppose this. We have the largest mining organizations out there in the galaxy. We are rich. We are full of competitors, companies and stuff like that. We don't want we don't want you to conquer us and stuff like that. So the Moria and a shipping company called Kel join up to form the Kel-Morian Combine. Now the Kel-Morian Combine basically promises, hey, if you're a mining guild and the Confederacy messes with you, come to us and we'll support you. We are the resistance against these people. Now because of this, Kel-Morian Tarsonis doesn't like this. Kel-Morian is in opposition to them, so Kel-Morian doesn't like them. Umoja is by itself and not really doing anything. They're just looking on this as a neutral thing, hoping, things blow over and they can just talk it out. Tensions rise up, resulting conflict, and they declare war on each other. I think over like some sort of resource operation on a fringe world, which is, by the way, the Confederacy has a system of classifying worlds. You're either a fringe world or you're a core world. Core worlds are like fully settled, fully developed, and they're like central to the Terran Confederacy. However, if you're lower than that, you're fringe. You're setting up your extraction colony. It is notable that I believe Marsara was a core world, but technically was also quickly called a fringe world, just because it wasn't economically powerful enough to be considered one. Wasn't settled enough. Anyways, going on from that, the Guild Wars, as the war between the Confederacy and the Kel-Morian Combine, lasts 4 years, resulting peace treaty means that the Combine retains its autonomy but loses all of its supporting mining guilds, as these guilds are basically taken over by the Confederacy. Now, the Confederacy gets super rich off this. They've become the hegemonic power. They've proven themselves, and this alarms Umoja. Umoja forms a Umojan protectorate and starts doing shady stuff, like arming militias, funding pirates, putting heavy developments into their military industrial complex, and arming themselves. This is why I find it funny that they have the Reagan Doctrine. Well, not the Reagan Doctrine, that they came from the Reagan, because that's basically what he did to the Soviet Union. Well, America's got to have more nukes. America's got to have more. Anyways. Confederacy continues to expand, to widen up. That is until Core Hall, one of their core worlds, starts rebelling, starts getting angry at the corruption within the Confederacy. The guy leading it is this man named Angus Banks, and he wants to democratize, he wants to purge corruption, and he's a generally good character. Well, eventually it gets too much. Core Hall begins rioting more and more until they eventually just start demanding independence. The Confederate Armed Forces, they withdraw, and that leads Core Hall to believe they had been successful. However, the Confederates in reprisal sent 3 assassins to kill Angus Mensk, his wife, and his daughter, and left their decapitated corpses on the balcony of their home. Now, Angus Mensk had a son. His name is Arcturus Mensk. He was a Confederate officer during the Guild Wars, and he was a wealthy prospector. That was until he learned of his family's death. And at that point, he swore vengeance upon the Confederacy, because he had knowledge of how to actually wage a war, how the Confederacy works. And Mensk himself is actually incredibly good at both finding like resources and setting up stuff and being politically connected with the Mugen Protectorate, he is able to wage a brutal guerrilla war. He takes over his father's mission. He leads the Korhal Independence Forces. But the Confederacy has enough. They launch 1,000 Apocalypse-class nuclear missiles from their capital of Tarsonis towards Korhal. 4 million people are killed in the nuclear detonations, and Korhal is effectively turned into a superheated sphere of blackened glass and stirring phantoms. Arcturus Vensk takes this opportunity to swears ultimate vengeance, and he and his men and anyone who joins him rebrand as the Sons of Korhal and become their biggest problem. And other anti-Confederate groups, they're pissed off by this. Like, this is bad. You cannot just nuke a planet like this. There were innocent people like that. And that leads us up to just before Starcraft 1. Upon Chaussara, they were an outlying Terran colony world belonging to the Confederacy. 15 unknown warships appeared in the skies above the colony and decimated every settlement upon the surface of Chaussara. Confederate forces within the system launched a counterattack as the fleet headed to Marsara. The fleet identifies itself as belonging to the Protoss and withdraws. Then, mysterious bug-like aliens appear on the planet Marsara. Thus, we start with StarCraft 1. That is the build-up to StarCraft 1. That is the Terran Prologue. This is all in the instruction manual, the game manual that they made for StarCraft 1, and this is all that lore. That is an incredible amount of lore that really flavors the setting and gives you a sense of how deep this universe goes. What else do we talk about here? This is just a prologue. Yeah, I got everything here right. I've put some time into researching doing this, just going over the game manual. There is further this stuff is like expanded upon in books and stuff like that. Books and like the lore here in between for the Guild Wars is expanded upon in stuff like Imensk and Heaven's Devils, I believe. And the first thing you need to know is James Raynor was a Confederate person until everyone was corrupt during the Guild Wars. Like, everyone was stealing stuff. And anyways, James Raynor was part of Guild Wars. Arcturus Menks was part of the Guild Wars. General Duke, Edmund Duke, was part of the Guild Wars, and Warfield met Arcturus Menks during the Guild Wars, and all that fun stuff. This is a setting that has a lot of stuff in it if you just look deeper into it. But what I went over in this thing is all you need to know in order to play StarCraft 1. StarCraft 1 is free, so you can just play that and play Brood War for free, and you can play Wings of Liberty for free. And if you want more of that, that's fine, but those are generally the 3 best campaigns in the StarCraft series out there. Anyways, I hope you have fun and never stop remembering to carry a rifle. Because you got a string bed. You know what? Have a nice day. I'm tired. Going to bed.